What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we return with Vicky, this time of Sicksense. It is so great to be able to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
it's always an honor to be able to speak with you. The last time I spoke to you, we touched upon Sicksense. It was very briefly, because I don't even think there was anything out yet, or it was very minimal. But now we got Cross Me Twice. This is the first album that I look at on Apple Music and be expected in 2025. So this is one of my most anticipated releases for Valentine's Day 2025.
Yeah.
Was this always the vision that you had in mind for Sicksense? Was this always sort of what you were planning to do, when we talked about it briefly last time, or is this a completely new envisioning of what Sicksense was supposed to be?
Yeah, I think it was just there was no intention exactly that it would become this. It was just a natural progression, I guess. Because when the band started, I joined more so as I don't want to say a part-time member, but, I was in the Agonist, so that was my priority at the time. And joining any other bands, I had to make sure that, or projects in general, I had to make sure that it wouldn't be something that would take up my entire day. So my role at the start was more just as a vocalist, some writing, but not to the extent that I have been writing for this record and upcoming records. So it was something that as time progressed, I started having a bigger and bigger role. And then with this album, I had, certain circumstances that allowed me to just really go in and even on the music side and put my own touch to it and just really try and make it be the best it can be, I guess. So long answer, but short answer, no, this wasn't the vision, but it just kind of happened.
I love the long answers. Nothing is worse than being 2 minutes into the interview and being on your sixth question, so I appreciate the long answers. I remember listening to your podcast with Doc Coyle back in the day, and you mentioned early influences like Britney Spears and whatnot, which I grew up with a lot of that.
Did I?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned
okay. Maybe. Yeah, maybe not an influence. Maybe it was that was the thing that was big, and I was right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we all are products of our musical environment of what's big at the time and everything like that. So I was gonna ask because I listened to when I listen to a track such as On Repeat or something like that, and I see those more electronic sort of elements that are incorporated in there, and a lot of that, real. There's so many elements in here that it's crazy. I see multiple different spaces and times and multiple different eras. Is it fair to say? I know it's cliche to ask what are your influences, but I think it's fair to say for Sicksense, everybody has their own different inspirations that they're bringing to the fold here, right?
For sure. And that's the difference with the two EPs. It was more a revival of nu metal, but with a bit of a modern touch and female vocals, which you don't see too often in nu metal. But then with Cross Me Twice, we kind of, pushed the dynamics a bit more. So the heavier sections got heavier and the softer sections got softer. And when the music is softer, then you're oh, I can sing in a softer way, and it makes sense because I'm not a huge fan of bands let's say the riffs are chugging and it sounds super heavy, and then the vocals come in and they're this super soft, clean thing. I'm not a huge fan of that because I always think of the live aspect of it, and I always think that it would, at least for myself, for my personal taste, it would feel weird if the band is super heavy and then I come in as a vocalist and I'm singing super softly. So I like it when the dynamics match, So on this record, we were able to do that. And there were entire sections where, no guitars, drums at all. It's just all keys, which you don't see that often, I guess. And that was, I think... Well, I started really working on keys and sound design and all that on this album. And I guess I didn't really know what would come of it. I play a bit of piano, but I've never done arrangements in this sense before. This is my first time. So I didn't really know what would happen. I would just open my DAW and then be like, "Ooh, I like this sound," and then play something and then put it. And now that I have that sound, let me add that sound, and so on and so forth. So, I guess that's how those electronic elements came to be. But influences, I guess, yeah, there's a heavy pop slash R&B 90s vibe there because I grew up on that. That was on the radio. That was all around me, and they knew what they were doing back then. Like those songs, like they're timeless. Like I will listen to. I just listened to Destiny's Child, like that album that has Survivor on there, and like the production still stands today. So it's so good, and it's so good to be freeing, to be able to be like, I'm gonna take something that I love that's not metal and try and like bring it into a metal band.
I think a lot of those R&B artists from that time period. I mean, okay, sure, it's not metal, it's not Slayer, obviously, but the rawness of the emotion that's expressed in it, those consist of some of the best singers ever. I think, whether it's Christina Aguilera or Neo or any of those R&B artists, when I think it's really called soul music because it really is their soul in that microphone. It's so raw. Yeah. You can't, even with like the studio magic that goes into everything, that one little slight off pitch can ruin the entire song. So I feel like that alone, people want to say it's mainstream or it's cliche talking about love songs. Try singing like that. It's it's one of a kind.
It definitely is, and it's like with anything in life, when there's a lot of money involved, so like 90s pop R&B, that was like top genre. Like these artists would play stadiums, right? There's a lot of money involved. You're gonna have the top of the top, both vocalists and musicians and everything, because you just can't afford to get someone that might hit a wrong note, so I always respect that in every genre, even if it's not my cup of tea. It's just like, are you the best in your field? And a lot of them are. And on top of that, if you look at the arrangements, like sometimes I will find similarities to metal music. Like, yeah, maybe there's not distortion guitars and like a full-on drum set. Maybe it's just like a hip-hop beat, but like what they're playing and the chord progressions and all that, if you just made it a metal song, it would work. And that's the beauty of music, that I find music is one thing and then genres are just like the different interpretations to it.
Definitely. But going to those genres, though, because I've mentioned it with you, I believe, in the last interview, you have a very eclectic voice. I think whether it is your screaming or your more aggressive vocals, it's a signature sound just as your clean vocals are. I think you have both, where I could tell that that's Vicky. And I've asked you before if you have a different usage of your voice expresses a different side of you. We could elaborate more on that, but do you think with these different instrumentals incorporated on here, with the electronic elements and the very metal elements, that also expresses a different side of who you are as well?
For sure. I mean, you mentioned you've heard the record, so I mean, maybe you've heard stuff that you're like, oh, I haven't heard Vicky quite sing like this before. Yeah, like I said, it really enabled me. I guess the heavy stuff, all the screaming, you've heard that from me. I don't think I did anything new in that sense, but I think with the singing, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sing a really soft section. I'm gonna sing higher, but like in a sweet voice instead of like belting it out, or I'm gonna rap some more or whatever. Like I definitely did things I haven't done before in the past, but I do appreciate you pointing out, I guess, the uniqueness of it. I don't know, because I like to think that no matter what I do, it still sounds like me. I'm not trying to sound like someone else. And so it's always great to hear that.
Yeah, especially with your covers too. Because again, I still think that the My Curse cover, because I've as a metalcore, as somebody who lives and dies by metalcore, I've seen that song covered so many times. But you were there's only one other distinct voice for that song, and it was Howard Jones himself. But I think that you brought your own mix to it. But I think it's the emotional energy that I noticed that you channel into your voice. I could tell that you put your heart and soul into it. And this is a question I like to ask vocals, because there's a lot of emotion, but there is like technical proficiency that you have to achieve. There's ways of taking care of your voice. There's, way of monitoring it. So do you sometimes find that maybe the emotions that you want to channel into the lyrics or the songs sometimes butt heads with the technical acceptability in a way?
It can for sure, because this is the beauty of self-recording. I think a lot of musicians, vocalists, they don't do that. They have to book a studio, and then they're like, okay, we're tracking from 12 to 6 today, get it done. And I think that kind of puts you in a box, because you don't have the time and energy and comfort, I guess, to just experiment as much as you want. Also, if you're a bit more introverted and you just like prefer to work alone, maybe you're a little shy to like go for something that you may end up sounding like pitchy, and you don't want to like leave a bad impression. So I really feel that like if you self-record, that can really help you broaden your horizons and really test out your voice. And that's something that I've been doing since 2009. I don't know. It's great because I could just sit here and I can try something, and I'll go through all the phases. I'll be like, okay, here's the verse. I'll sing the verse. Maybe it'll be like on key, but it'll sound like I'm a little bored because I guess I'm focusing too much on hitting the notes. And then I'm like, okay, let's try and put more emotion into it. You put the emotion, then you're losing the notes. And then it goes full circle, and then you're able to get the emotion and get the notes too. So, but I have the freedom to do that, and the luxury, I guess, of recording by myself. So that's something I like to tell vocalists, even if they're already professional vocalists, just like invest in a small vocal setup, because it'll really help you bring out the best of you.
I've always found it to be so ironic, because when you're whether you're in like a high-end studio or in like a home recording studio or something like that, in the end it's a very isolated environment. Tracking vocals, you're in a tube effectively. Like I almost feel like it's like an interrogation room. But then, as somebody who's had the privilege of seeing you perform live numerous times, you have great crowd interaction and stage presence, and you bring a lot of atmosphere. But how do you sort of get that energy in such an isolated environment like a recording studio? How do you replicate that in a live setting, or even capture that energy for a recording in and of itself?
I don't know, that's a tough question, because I feel like when I record, I'm always trying to service the song. So if I go for a high note or like a crazy like screaming section or something that I know is difficult, I think of the live aspect, but I kind of don't. Like, I do it to myself, like I like to say, because I'm trying to service the song. And I'm like, okay, but if I don't go for that, then the song isn't going to be as good. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I know some artists play it safe, and they don't do crazy stuff on record because they want to be able to do it live. Or you have artists that do crazy stuff on record, then they can't do it live, so they have to use tracks. You get all facets of this, but for myself, I just kind of do it, and I'm like, I'll figure it out at a later date. But I think there's something in my head that knows that I can do it in the future. Like I am pushing myself, but not too much. But it has been challenging. Like, first of all, thank you for the compliment. But it has been challenging sometimes with a live set, if you have like back-to-back difficult sections and you're like, now I need to take a sip of water and wipe down, but that didn't pick up. Okay, great. What was I saying? Yes, it's been tough where you're like, oh man, why did I make these songs so difficult? And now we're playing them in a row, and I want to talk to the crowd and have more of like move around on stage and headbang and all that, but I can't because I need to make sure I nail the next part. So ultimately, I think it's just about that balance where it's like, okay, if you do have a difficult section of a song, make sure that maybe after that song, there's a bit of a break. Let's put like an interlude on stage or something, and make sure that the speech where I talk to the crowd is between two songs that aren't too difficult, so it's just about preparing and practicing and trying it out a bunch of times in rehearsal too. Yeah. Like you can't just practice a set at home all nonchalant and then go on stage and do it. Like you have to practice it as if you're playing the show.
Do you have like dolls set up or something like that, or like figures you got to interact with?
Not that aspect, but like the time, for example, like a lot of bands when they rehearse, they'll play the song and then they'll take like a 5-minute break of talking or whatever, just shooting the shit with each other, and then they'll play the next song, and like that's unrealistic because like no, you finish, you have to make sure your guitar's in tune, you need to go on to the next song, so just practice as if it's an actual set. At least like 80%. Like, okay, you don't need to start like pushing people around, but yeah. I think just practice is key, and maybe a lot of bands don't get to practice as much. I know, like, just like us, not everyone lives in the same city sometimes, so bands get together like 2 weeks before a tour and they jam like 3-4 times and then they leave for tour. And I think, playing a great show, it's part preparation, it's part experience. The longer you're on the road, the better your shows are going to get. You're on autopilot, so it's just balance at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I have 2 more questions for you. One is circling back to lyrics, because again, I think your lyrical content, like, very poetic. Like, I've always said, like, I get imagery. I get, like, if I look at your lyrics, it feels like I'm reading a graphic novel because of the imagery that comes through it. And I'm so happy to see that Sicksense continues to do that. Like, it brings almost like I guess with the instrumentals, it gives me something futuristic, but then like I feel like your voice brings something very fairy tale oriented. Like, it goes through all different settings and different times, depending on what you're singing about. If it's more personal or if it's, more of like an external subject matter, does it maybe resonate with you differently? Does it feel like you channel a different energy? Like, again, I always circle back to the song, but like Mr. Cold is still one of my favorite songs that you've done. And like, do you just feel like you have to put yourself in other shoes or in a different mindset depending on what you sing about?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's where it helps to write personal lyrics, because if it happened to you, you know what that feels like, and you're able to, get that emotion out. But if, let's say, you're singing about something fictional or that you can't relate to exactly, it does help to associate to a similar feeling that maybe you had at some point in time. It definitely, I will say, it definitely does matter on the subject in the lyrics. So like, if it's an angrier section, you should sound a little angrier. If it's an emotional, like a sad section, like, sound somber. Don't be singing in a bright voice. Like, that stuff all does matter to me. Sometimes it's cool to do the opposite, kind of as like an oxymoron. If it's like a sarcastic section or something, which I love that sometimes too, where like the lyrics are super dark and the vocalist sounds happy, sometimes that's cool. But I think, again, it just comes down to a personal choice that you make as an artist, as you're writing the song and as you're recording the song. You're like, what is the best possible style I can put to this? And you work with that. And you make sure that your voice can do it as well. Like, I would hate to do something in studio that sounds like super emotional and super, like, there's a lot going on, and then live I just can't do that because whatever, too much adrenaline. I have found that that's the tough thing with live shows. It's actually not the super heavy, super belted out stuff. It's actually the softer, more emotional stuff, because you have adrenaline, pumping through you and moving around, and you're out of breath, and then you have to like tone it down all of a sudden and sound like super emotional and soft and all that, and that's where it can be a little tricky. So I guess I answered.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I interviewed, Apples and Orange is in terms of genre, but I interviewed a Buck Cherry a long time ago back at NAMM.
Yeah.
And they were saying that a slow song is more difficult than a fast song, because with a fast song, it's skipping along so quick. You may stumble here and there, but if you just keep up with the tempo, you keep up with the rest of the band, you're good. But if you're playing a slow song and you slightly botch a note, to quote them, your ass is hanging in the wind. Like, everybody knows it's you fucked up that note. And
yes.
But also with that emotion, because let's say you write a very sad or very angry song and you're having a really good day on tour and you are just not in that angry mindset. or there's a very happy song, but you're just having a miserable day. Like, but you have to play the same song every day, but you're not going to feel the same way every day. That's a whole other line of challenges.
For sure. And that's where like muscle memory kicks in, and just like I said, experience. The more you do it, the easier it is, even if you're not feeling it, to make it sound like you're feeling it. Because at the end of the day, it is a job. You know, it's a job we love doing, but it is a job, and people paid to come see you, so you gotta give the best show you can give, you know.
Of course.
But yeah, that's absolutely correct with the softer songs too. You're more exposed, you know. Like, it happened probably multiple times, but one time I can remember that we were playing a show with the Agonist, and there was like a power issue in the venue, and everything just shut down at the end. Thankfully, it was at the end of a song, and I was singing, but everything went out but my microphone, and I was like, just keep singing.
Go a cappella. That's where you pulled that was your 8 Mile moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, it definitely at that time you're just like, I don't even know if this sounds good because I have no music, I have nothing. I just go for it. Which you don't have that problem with heavy sections. You know, also you make one mistake, the distortion and the blast beats or whatever cover up that mistake. Like, you don't get that luxury with soft songs, for sure.
Definitely. And then the final question I wanted to ask you is, next year is going to mark a 10-year anniversary. It's the anniversary of Eye of Providence, your debut. And it's important I'm asking this question as a fan of your work, because for a lot of people, it's the first time many of us have heard your voice. I mean, when I heard Disconnect Me for the first time, and when you when you put out Eye of Providence, I was astonished, because I've seen bands change vocalists before, but they always brought in, like, for instance, Killswitch Engage, when Howard left, they brought Phil from All That Remains singing in it. And so, like, okay, that's cool. I've seen vocalists bring in vocalists from other bands. You were the first vocalist I discovered because that there was a vocal change. And again, I was astonished to this day. Eye of Providence is a sentimental album to me whenever I listen to Faceless Messenger or I Endeavor or, Architects Hallucinate, etc. Just, what was your sort of mindset that you went into the making of that? Because, like, I don't mean to sound like a total either fanboy or dad or something like that, but I'm, like, really proud of everything you've done since then, and Sicksense is another example of that. But what was the sort of creative headspace going into that, and how would you say that paved the way for what we would later hear from you?
Yeah, I think that was my first, I guess, full-length album. I mean, I recorded stuff before, but with local bands and whatnot, but that was my first full-length, like, here's a professional studio and this is coming out through a label, and then we have tours and all that, and it just kind of went from 0 to 100, so it was a challenge mentally, and it was a challenge physically as well, to, like, I didn't know how it was gonna go. I wrote a lot, the majority of the lyrics on that album, and almost like all my vocal patterns and all that. So that's like a big thing. It's not like you get bands, for example, like Nightwish, they've switched vocalists many times, twice. But it always, like, you're not worried it's going to sound like Nightwish because the songwriter is the same songwriter and the vocalist changes, but the lyrics and the melodies, they're the same because they're coming from the same person. And so every band is different in that. But as a musician, like, it's really important for me to be able to write my own stuff. I wouldn't want to be in a band where I'm just singing other people's words, and other people's melodies. So Eye of Providence, I guess, was a challenge in that, where it's like, okay, I'm doing this. I've done it before, but not to this level, And there was a time pressure too, like, this needs to be done by that date, a lot of things where it was just like, yeah, sink or swim, So I think I did all right. I think it was like a good confidence booster that, like, okay, I could do this professionally. I could do it with this band. I could do it anywhere. And that only got better and better with time. when I mean that, I mean like the confidence aspect of knowing I can write a song. If you tell me like, hey, you have X amount of time, get a song done, I can write a song. I'm not ever gonna feel like I can't do this or I can't rise up to the challenge. So
you definitely you rose to the occasion. I'm speaking from my own experience. I used to be, I liked melodic death metal here and there, but I dabbled with it. I liked some Dark Tranquillity, some At the Gates, some In Flames. I listened to this album, and then it made me very into melodic death metal. Like, it brought me down a rabbit hole. So I think when it comes to a way to make, a first impression in the metal scene, you definitely hit the nail on the head. I think it is one of the best first impressions that we've gotten in metal. So I just wanted to ask about that because it's an important anniversary, at least for me, in my musical journey.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely proud of that album and all the albums I've done. I feel like I always give, my 100%. Like I've never walked into a studio or never approached a song and just been like, just get it done, like I'm always trying to do the best I can do for that moment in time. After the fact, you look back and you're like, I wish I would have done that instead of that. But like, no, for that moment, I did the best I could do. And that's a great feeling to have when you look back on everything you created, because, you should be proud. Yeah. So
it's a classic. It's a classic. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. Most of all, thank you for continuing to give us amazing music. Again, Sicksense is a fantastic record. It is definitely going to be the album that will serve as my soundtrack to starting off 2025. Is there just anything else with the release of this that you would like to promote in terms of what we could be expecting in terms of shows, or what else you're allowed to talk about at this moment, of course?
Yeah, we are working on shows. We have one that's been announced, which is our own show on release date. So actually the February 14th, when the album is coming out, we are playing a show local here in Arizona, in Phoenix. That's going to be a lot of fun. But we're working on other shows before that, hopefully, like in supporting slots. No full tours or anything like that, but we're working on it. We're trying. It's just, a whole new band, new project. Getting it off the ground is always a challenge. But yeah, if you're in the Arizona area, Phoenix, and you don't have anything to do for Valentine's Day, come to the show. That would be a lot of fun. And just all the links, check out the links, Spotify, pre-orders, all that stuff. Just any way people can find Sicksense and check out our work and support us would be fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Vicky of Sicksense. Be sure to check out Cross Me Twice, coming out this Valentine's Day 2025. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.